to warm up.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the October committee meeting to order. Mr. Johnston.
Okay. So first, if you want to take a look, I just want to mention under program presentations, not that we have a program being presented tonight, but I wanted to call to your attention an award that Julie Miller is going to be receiving. We have Julie designated to be our Homelessness Liaison. So just so you know that we do actually have students that each year throughout the school year end up falling under the definition of homelessness. That could be someone that's lost their house. That could be somebody that's been evicted, things of that nature, and they're put on a homelessness list. So Julie serves as the person that coordinates that. She then coordinates with Andrea Sheasley at the Aaron IU, who is the overall coordinator for the area. And together, what they do is find resources for those individuals. So Mrs. Sheasley has nominated Julie, and she was actually selected. So she will get the Paving the Way to Education Success Advocate Award for the work that she does with homelessness. So I just wanted to mention that. Nothing under negotiations or curriculum this evening. So we're going to move right on to budget and finance. And as we have gone through budgets in the past, we're already going to be starting to talk about some background information. Mr. Muscatello will be talking about items that's related to the upcoming 21 budget for us to take a look at. So, Mr. Muscatello.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Good evening, everyone. In your packet, I believe you have 4 items related to a budget update. The first one I'd like to take your attention to is the one that says earned income tax collections in the upper left-hand corner. I put together a report here just to compare 2018-19, 19-20, and 2020-21 year-to-date collections for earned income tax. And as you remember, this was one of the areas where if COVID was really going to hit us, this is one of the areas. And the higher unemployment is, the higher or should I say the lower amount of earned income tax that we'll collect. So I'm going to draw your attention first to the 2018-19 column, which you'll see that we collected $851,000 in earned income tax collections. That was actually a record year for us. And you can see in 2019-20, we're estimated to collect around $811,000. So frankly, that's not too bad. I believe that in 19-20, I estimated we'd collect $825,000. So I don't really want you to compare 19-20 to 18-19. It's there for your reference, but that really isn't the story that needs to be told. If you look at the 2020-2021 column, you'll notice that collections are on pace. So we're actually doing okay in earned income tax collections. I would have expected to see a lag in collections at this point, and we haven't quite seen that yet. However, you'll notice that we have a big month coming up in November, and that's when a lot of earned income taxes are remitted to the district. So I may have maybe a better or a worse story to tell you come November or December. But at this point, 2020-21 collections seem to be on track, and I'm excited about that. But if we see another wave of large unemployment, for example, I think there are some impending layoffs coming in the airline industry. I don't know if that's going to affect our district so much. I know the cruise line industry is still shut down, and that has been extended again. Once again, I don't know if that's going to affect our area. But at this point, it looks like earned income tax collections are at least remaining steady. I won't say stable, but at least remaining steady. Any questions on that? I'll also note, and there's not a report here, we're only 2 months into the property tax collection. I've only received 4 checks at this point. However, property tax collections, as expected in the first couple of months of the year, are stable. And the reason why that is what we see right now are escrow accounts being paid in the discount phase. So if we're going to see a dip in property tax collections, it will be on the back end of the year, when those folks who do not pay through escrow pay out of pocket, and we'll see if they're able to pay before the end of the year. So at this point, I'm encouraged, but it's as expected with property tax because we see them paying those out of escrow anyways. Any comments on that? Okay. The other one I want to draw your attention to is a much more complicated and crazy spreadsheet. It has the district names on it and a bunch of columns. It's sort of small. I apologize for that. It is a lot of information. I wanted to try to get some information from all of the districts as to what their 2020-21 revenues, budgeted revenues, and their budgeted expenditures look like, which is the first upper left-hand corner box. And I'll fill that sheet in as the year ends with actual revenues and actual expenditures, so we have a comparison. But I wanted to show you a breakdown of how that compares to Penn's Manor in terms of budgeted revenues as a percentage of local, state, and federal as a percentage of the overall revenues, and then budgeted expenditures as the percentage of salaries, benefits, and total. We're right in line. You can see, with the exception of maybe Indiana School District, we're pretty much right there at the average. I'm looking at the far right-hand corner for budgeted expenditures. So we're pretty much right there at the average with the total salaries and benefits as a percentage of our total budget. There's really nothing out of whack there. I'll just bring to your attention that, we're 38.86% of our budget is salaries alone. That's pretty well in line. And what we've seen in the last more than 10 years at this point is a fairly stagnant salary increase here in this district. And the reason why that is, yeah, we give out salary increases. There's no doubt about it. But we have enough retirements to offset those salary increases, where our salaries have stayed stagnant for at least the last decade or so, maybe less than that. And once again, benefits are in line. The reason why I put this together is I wanted to see, are our benefits richer than other districts' benefits? Are our benefits structures different than other benefits, other districts? And that doesn't appear to be the case. We're at 28.78%. And you can see the average among all of the districts in this list is 28.33%. So that's right in line. What we know is that Indiana County has often shared a higher salary schedule for most in most cases, but we know that typically benefits are pretty high as a percentage of the budgets across the board in many of the districts in Pennsylvania. So this isn't unusual. The next box, if you go down to the second part of that sheet there, the next comparison that I make is fund balances and debt, and that's just for your review. Once again, I want to draw your attention to the fact that, as you can see, in our general fund balance, we're pretty well below the average, and that's fine, because you can see that some districts strategically keep very large general fund balances. And I just want to make sure everybody understands this. A general fund balance isn't just cash sitting over in the corner waiting to be spent. Yes, cash is definitely part of that, but it's not the only piece of that. It is a much larger calculation of everything the district owns minus everything the district owes, and its cash, and it owns its cash. So cash is just one piece of that. And then, of course, there's the capital reserve fund balance, which is separate from the general fund. And I'll remind you that once money is moved from the general fund and into the capital reserve, it cannot be moved back. And this district has strategically made movements from its general fund to its capital reserve in an effort to keep up with its facilities. And that definitely shows when you walk around this district. And the next column there is debt. And I just wanted to show you that average among the school districts in this list is 14.8 million. We're well below that. And that includes the most recent $6 million bond issue that we did. And you can see that the next column there is our debt service, what we pay annually to meet our debt obligations. And once again, we're well below the average on that one as well. I threw a chart in on the right there because I wanted to show you that the districts in our area, while they vary wildly in budgeted expenditures and budgeted revenues, we're pretty close in terms of free and reduced lunch counts. There's some change in some of them, but for the most part, you can see that the average is 50%. We fall right in the middle with that, 51%. And what that is, that's an indicator of poverty in an area. So the higher the free and reduced lunch count, technically the lower the income. And that free and reduced lunch count is used for a variety of things: federal funding, cafeteria subsidies, E-rate funding for technology, and things like that. Okay, and then the last column there, I just wanted to give you a quick comparison. This is the same chart that I showed you last year. This is where we stand in this current fiscal year. Penns Manor is at 14.7288 mills, and the average with Indiana is 12.43, and the average without Indiana is 12.02. So we're not the highest, we're not the lowest.
Josh,
Yes,
couple comments.
sure.
I think it's good for the board to know, if you look in the debt piece, we have debt service of 850. I think in a couple years, that's going to be reduced to about half.
Yeah, we're gonna see probably $250,000 a year less in debt service in about, I think it's 3 years.
Was it 250? I thought it was more.
I think it's gonna be about 250.
But strategically, it's an opportunity to build up your capital reserves.
Right, that's actually a great point, Bob. And what Bob's mentioning is that we already budget $850,000 every year for debt service. And our debt service is for capital improvements. And so one thing we don't want to lose is we don't want to lose our ability to fund our capital purchases, whether it be improvements to the building or other capital purchases. And so what Bob is suggesting, and I totally agree with him, is that when that time comes, when those bond issues are paid off, we'll have to sit down as a board and talk about what do we do with, and I'll call it savings, but it's not really a savings. What do we do with that savings in debt service? Do we look at having that moved as an automatic transfer into the capital reserve, which would be my opinion, or do we look at some other alternative? But I think it's important to keep in mind that we definitely don't want to lose. We don't want to realize that as pure savings to a budget. It's built in, and if we ever want to do another bond issue, we want to make sure that debt service is available to us to be
I
redirected.
thought it was higher than 250, but
I'll have to go back and
not.
check.
The other thought, and I've never been able to put my finger on this, but I always look at the local piece of the school district's budgets. Penns Mountain, because that's what our taxpayers are, that's their burden. So ours is 25%,
Mhm.
almost 26%.
Mhm.
Then I go to a school like Homer Center, theirs is worse. Matter of fact, theirs isn't. That's bad shape. I'd be concerned. 40% of their budget is coming from local taxpayers, and then the ones that seem to be doing well in terms of capital reserves and having dollars has been purchase line, but they only have 17%. And do we know why that mix is different?
We don't know. We don't know why.
Because that's something I would try to reconcile. I see Northern Canberra is 21, and I don't know if it's aid ratio or whatever, but whenever I look at free and reduced lunch, it doesn't make sense. But does the board understand what I'm saying? If you have a lower mix for the local piece, the state's subsidizing a larger percent for a lot of the other schools. So I'm just saying, how is purchase line so low? Unless it's an aid ratio. So I think it's important for us to try to find out why that's the case. The lower that is, the better off it is for our taxpayers.
I agree.
Well, one question I have too, Josh, I guess as far as this information goes and the data that you have, where was that pulled from? Is that like a state website you gather this information, or did you just contact the schools and they gave you information?
Yeah, in some cases I have to contact the schools. So there's no current state website. You can rely on older data and get it from a state website. But what I ask for is their annual financial reports, and I just pull it directly from their most recent audited financial year. In some cases, actually probably in all cases, the budgeted revenues and expenditures, every school district has to post their budget to their website in advance of approving that budget. And I just found them on their website.
Okay, because that was just one of the things that Bob had mentioned about, comparing schools and wonder what purchase lines doing and everything. I drew my attention to Marion Center right off the bat, because if I recall, like that last column or last box we just talked about was property tax and millage and everything like that. And in comparison to where we're at, what Marion Center's showing as far as millage rates go, I don't believe that they had a tax increase this past year, but yet when you look up and you see they have no debt service and they have 8.4 in the capital reserve in a general fund, what are they doing differently? Because I know they have a little bit more of a budget compared to what we have. And if you look at their local tax pool, it's a little bit higher, not much than where we at. So I'm just trying to figure, a lot of times you would think, and I've heard this discussion before, we need to raise that tax every year. Well, I know they didn't this past year. How did they get to where they're at now is what I would just ask.
Yeah, just by quick glance, I would say, first of all, their assessed value is 555,000. So even a lower millage rate. So they're getting $6.6 million in property tax levy, which is more than $2.4 million more than we're getting every year. That's important. I mean, that's important to note, because while their millage rate is less than 12, they're still getting $2.4 million a year more than we're getting. The other thing to keep in mind too is, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, Marion Center hasn't done a building project in 30 plus years.
That's what I was going to tell you. Rich.
And so, this is somewhat anecdotal information, but as I understand it, their goal over there was to accumulate a large amount of capital reserve dollars in an effort to issue a large bond and offset it with local dollars. And I think their goal over there was 10 plus million, and to issue have a bond issue for 30 or 40 million. And that while I may have the figures wrong, I understand that was what their plan was. So there was a purpose to building up that much cash.
I think you're right. And that's why you see the buildup of capital reserves there. But if the intent, Rich, was that they were going to do a bond issue for renovations, you would see debt service and less capital reserves. But I do think that our goal should be to have adequate dollars in fund balance from year to year, at least 10, 15%. And I think we should work on building up capital reserves.
I agree. And at a minimum, this board has a policy that's been passed, I don't know, long time ago, that we will have a general fund balance of 10% or more. So what does that mean? That means that in the general fund balance, we have $2.2 million, and that's as of the end of the last audited financial year. So it would be 2018, 2019. That's what we started this year with. So we're looking somewhere between 1.8 and $2 million in there. We're pretty close. Okay. I would say that's a win. We don't want much less than that in there. Don't forget that in the capital reserve, that would be closer to 4.7 million at the beginning of last year, because we spent 1.4 on the energy savings project. So we issued a bond of 6 million and the project was 7.3 or 4. So we spent local dollars to fund that project. That's why the capital reserve is only at 3.5 instead of closer to 4.9. So that's important to keep in mind. Yes, we will build that back up, and we'll do it strategically. But at the end of the day, one thing we do know, and as you travel through this county, we have a beautiful facility here, and that's a strategic part. That's a strategy this board has taken. And so one thing we're not going to see here is we're not going to see an $8 million fund balance in our capital reserve, because we have strategically saved it and spent it and invested it into our facilities, into our community. So. Okay. Any other questions on that sheet? If you have any questions, I know there's a lot of information on there. Please just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer it for you. The next sheet I want to look at is the one with a whole bunch of boxes on it. Not the one that has a list of salaries and benefits, but the other one. And so we're switching gears. What I just did was give you sort of an update as to 2018 or 1920s EIT and sort of where we're at this year in comparison to others. This is looking at next year, and this is extremely early in the process. But I feel I feel we need to get started early on this. And just because of the dire situation that we were in at the beginning of this year, where we may end up for this year, and we need to look at next year. And so what I started out with at the top there was contractually obligated salary increases. We've already agreed to these. There's no changing these. We are giving these contract increases out. And those increases amount to $185,849. And that's barring no additional retirements as of right now. I've added to that in the next box our obligations to PCERS, Social Security, Medicare, and Workers' Comp. And you can see that $185,000 quickly turns into some expensive cash there. So the next box is property tax levy, and PDE just released yesterday Act 1 index figures. I am by no means making any recommendations to you today. I just want to give you a comparison that if we compare the 2020-2021 property tax levy with a 14.7288 mills to the max this district could raise to for the next budget year in 2021-22 of 15.3768 mills, you will see that unadjusted, the most we can increase property taxes, the revenue would increase by $187,000. And so I don't want to get into the specifics of the next topic because I believe that would be for an executive session. That's for your reference only. But I'll draw your attention to the bottom line there. Net projected potential retirement savings plus the full amount of the unadjusted property tax increase and that is basically what we have to work with. That's what we could potentially have to work with if all of those pieces fell in line. So I'm not going to mention any specifics of that chart because I think that's an executive session conversation, but that is for your reference. And I'll have you know that if you look at that chart, so the first one on that chart, the fourth one on that chart, are retiring. Okay. So if you have any specific questions about that, please send me an email. I'll be happy to address that for you. And I think that's it, actually. Yes. So we're getting started with the process. We do not know any increases in healthcare or health insurances at this point. It's extremely early for that. We won't get that until next April. And we don't know other things like savings in things in supplies and other purchase professional services. All we really know at this point in time is if everybody sticks around that is here with us now as employees sticks around for next year, we know what those increases would be. Yes, John.
Josh?
Yes.
Me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Are you going to be able to swing our budget $2 million like they did in Indiana?
Yes, actually, I called them up and asked them which magic trick they used, and they shared with me the specifics of it and sent me a YouTube video on how to pull it off. So I'm going to give it a shot. Well, so that's actually a good point. Speaking of last year's budget, which is what John is referring to in Indiana, we will end last year in a positive fashion. I can't give you the specific number at this point in time, but it will be positive, which will be the first time it's been positive in the last 3 years.
One item just on the chart you just mentioned, sure. Josh, about retirements.
Yes.
And I guess just to understand that just a little bit more, what you have here is in regards to salary and benefits and, yes. and incentive. Now, unused leave, is that factored into this as well?
It is not, because and that's actually a good point, but they're all over the board. So for example, support staff, potential retirees, they are not eligible. They're eligible for sick pay, but they're not eligible for anything else. And it's capped. So it's not as significant. The teacher ones, yes, that would be significant. Probably a good idea to include that in there. But we also have, and while it would be a cash hit, we set aside money to pay those payouts. Not necessarily budgeted in the year in which they would retire, but we have something called deferred absences or compensated absences, which we pay out of that fund.
Okay, so that column of retirement incentive is in regards to contractual grow
That's right.
obligations outside of the leave payout.
That's correct.
Type things.
That's correct.
Okay, so in addition to, so that
Yeah.
bottom line, that net savings,
There would probably, it would be less.
yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, it wouldn't reflect the total here.
That's a good point, and that's, I should probably add that in there.
Other questions, comments under budget?
On that same chart that Mr. Plenick was questioning, that assumes that savings assumes we replace everyone? Is that how we come up with
Yes,
that?
it does.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions on budget items? Okay. Moving down along, buildings and grounds. And if Buildings and Grounds Committee, if we could just keep you afterwards, just for a couple minutes, I'd like to talk to you. Next, athletics. Currently, we have nothing to talk about under athletics, and also nothing under transportation at this point. So moving to public relations, I do want to let you know that we do have 4 retirees from last school year, and we've just picked up a couple recently, and we always acknowledge them at a board meeting. So we're asking them to come back next Thursday to do that, and they've all been invited. Not sure if they'll all be here, but we will certainly acknowledge them next week at our public board meeting. Moving along to policies, I know there's quite a list that's in front of you, and I just want to preface by saying that as PSBA and as we move through COVID and the things that we're encountering, it's basically, except for one policy I'll talk about at the end, which is brand new, the rest is just actually adding some minor revisions. So again, you have a copy of every one of these policies. The bold is what PSBA is recommending for us to change in them. But just let me walk down through the summary sheet so that we can get a taste of or feeling as to what those revisions are talking about. And again, all reflecting everything that we've encountered with COVID-19. Just starting off with policy 111, which has to do with teacher lesson plans. It's adding language for us to allow for online platform for teachers to keep their lesson plans in. So again, just reflecting the day and age we're switching to. Policy 203, and remember our 200 level policies has to do with students. I just want to let you know that policy 203, when it comes to immunizations and communicable diseases, that it's all reflecting back to the health and safety plan. So there's language in there now dealing with health and safety as going through COVID. The same thing going over to policy 209, some minor language, and again, all going back to health and safety. And I also want to point out that in the 200 levels, down further on your list in the agenda, you will see having to do with immunizations and communicable diseases and attendance. We have not used those admin regs in the past. We've simply either put out a letter from the nurse or we've added language in one of the handbooks. But the day and age that we're getting into, I feel it's our best interest that we place out all the information in an admin regulation. And again, some of the language that you'll see in there is allowing, if there's a state order, to relax any type of immunization because we get into another situation where things are closed down and those can't be done at the right time. So it's this language that actually allows the process and the actual items to take place when it goes to do with immunizations, or if there's some other new virus that comes up. That's what the language is in both of those 200 level policies. And again, if you look at the admin reg in detail, it'll give every communicable disease that we should be aware of. And I just want to put that out there for the public to see now. and we'll attach those admin regs right in under the policy. So again, I just want to remind everybody that if you go to our website and go to About Us and go to School Board, you'll see our agendas in that same box. You'll see all of our policies, and we'll add those admin regs right into those policies. Going over to policy 314, and again, these have to do with then actual employees. Again, board approved health and safety plan language is added. Specific language on communicable diseases and exclusion from school facilities. So again, if someone in the Department of Health is telling us that a person can't be here, that type of language is in there. Also dealing with attendance, some language dealing with employees. And again, this is all coming about because of COVID-related experiences that we've had in the past. Also going over to policy 332, work period. Just putting some language in there that it may be necessary to change our instruction. We've already talked about that. You know what we've already gone through. So really it's all these policies are catching up to the things that we've done. So it's that we created the health and safety plan, that we adjusted our calendar to fit and accommodate individuals. Same moving over to sick leave, putting in also allowing a flexibility of language of who can actually complete a medical form for an individual. It also has the provisions, the need to quarantine. That's also new language added in 334. Moving to 340, just again, really emphasizing the health and safety plan and the responsibilities to account for students that are basically out in virtual, along with in-person. So language is added to 340 to accommodate that. Moving to policy 705, you can see that policy, the language is added in there, allows us to change the orders of use of facility based on the fact of what we have to, either it's a regulation that's handed down to us or an order. So it's just accommodating again. I know I keep saying COVID related, but that is exactly what has been the impact on every one of these policies. Moving to the 800, that's our operation. When we've already completed this, in 803, it's mentioning the emergency instructional time plate that we voted on and already submitted and approved by PDE. It's acknowledging that template now for districts. And then school code 52001, you already passed that motion, which is then giving me the authority as the superintendent to change as needed for anything that we encounter. So we've been doing that. Also, public attendance at school events, should we have to limit anything just as we are now, and that fluctuates back and forth. It gives us the permission to do that. And then 907, also the same response is that at times, and we have currently, we're not doing like the parent lunches during the day. And that policy in 907 is adding language to allow us just to have the fluctuation because typically we want visitors. But you know, in this time that we're in, that we have to limit it, visitors in, and that just gives us the flexibility in the policy to do that. Any questions on any of those? I know it's a lot of reading, but don't be afraid to ask. Let's then, you see the two admin regs that we talked about. And then I just want to focus on one that will just be the first reading next week. And that has to do with telework. And actually, I'm just going to tell you, we've already had to do this. And that is when we had to quarantine our kindergarten rooms and our kindergarten teachers, that they did work from home. So this is a brand new policy. So we'll have a first reading and then we'll approve after. And it just lays out the fact that we will and we need to at times have to ask people to work from home. So it just spells out the guidelines and the expectations that we would have for an employee should we have to place them at home to do their work. And certainly as you read down through that, you have questions throughout the week on that particular one. Since it's brand new, don't be afraid to email me, ask me. We'll make any adjustments that you have questions to. Any questions to any of those?
Okay.
Yep.
One question I have is from the teleworking side, as
Yes.
far as our employees go here. I mean, nobody has any issue connecting, performing that work based on where they live?
We have not so far. No,
Okay.
we haven't had an issue. Anyone that we've had to send home, that's exactly what we ask them before we sit down and make those plans. So if we have to quarantine them, that's the first question. Do you have the equipment? Are you going to be able to access? And at this point, we've been able to function with every one of them.
Okay, if it would occur at a point in time that was unable to happen, how do we approach that situation?
So the first would be, and I wouldn't hope this is the situation, but if it's that they have access to internet and we can help them get that with a hotspot, we would do that first.
Okay.
If they're in a situation where they don't have access, you're correct. We would make the determination that they couldn't, and then we would basically end up having a substitute that would fill in that particular situation. But I will say that even going through last year, no one was in a situation that they have come to any immediate supervisor to said that they had a difficult time. And I know with any of the three that we've employees that we've placed home, there wasn't an issue at all.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, any other questions on any of those? Okay, moving to new business. You can see at the top, we've listed 2 people that is asked to be approved on the sub list. So we will have those as a motion to approve next Thursday. Moving to new business letter B, we'll have a motion asking you to approve a salary step increase for Mr. Lansbury, who will be going to bachelor's plus 20 on the pay scale. C and D, we do have 2 students and an executive session. If we could just stay after, I'll certainly give you the details of the students and situations that are listed there, and on those 2 outside placement requests that we're asking you to approve. Letter E, under new business, approve employment retirement resignation. That is Mrs. Vahovic. So we will have a motion next week for her approval. We also have received a letter of resignation from Mrs. Cortazzo as the National Honor Society advisor. So we'll approve and ask for you to allow us to post and advertise immediately after we accept that, get that posted so that we can have someone else hired in her place. We also have a motion, letter G, to approve Mandy Gillow as an individual who could serve as a monitor out at the fitness center. Again, she's asking that she basically wouldn't be on the regular schedule, but that she would be happy to fill in if the regular folks could not attend. Also moving to H and I, they're very similar, but you just see the difference. It's elementary school and junior high school. So the last time we approved these, we also approved one for each building. Previous to that, there only needed to be a safety MOU between the school district and the state police for one district. Now they're asking one for each building. And again, it just spells out the relationship that we'll have with the state police, how we'll interact with them, how they expect things to be ready for them should they need them. And again, that really is not changing. It's just a requirement that we go through a process, that we develop that we renew the MOU with the law enforcement that the school district sits in. In our case, we're certainly not in a borough, so our relationship is with the Pennsylvania State Police. And again, we need to do that every 2 years, so that's why it's on the agenda to approve. Next, is there any questions on any of those so far? Sorry, I was moving along quickly, and don't be afraid to stop me. Next, letter J, approve agreement with the Wilson Group, and I will turn that over to Josh. That is related to a copier in the district office.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson. Just really quickly on this, I brought this up to you guys at one point in time, maybe a couple of months ago, but I wanted to put it on hold because the lease agreement didn't end or doesn't end until November. Just a quick run of the numbers for you. So we have often leased our copiers here in an attempt to spread the debt service payments out over 5 years. And that has worked well for cash flow reasons. However, it really doesn't make good financial sense to do so. You pay lease points, you pay administrative and origination fees. So if the budget permits and you permit, I'd like to strategically change how we fund these very large, costly machines. Now, this is not a great example because this one's a cheaper machine. But the other 2 large copiers that we have in the district, we did lease those last time, and I sort of regret it, but we can change that next time around. But just to give you a quick analysis of how this looks, I'm proposing to you today a machine that will, when we pay for it out of pocket, we'll have it for a minimum of 5 years. Out of pocket, all in cost will be $14,133. Sorry, my mic wasn't on and all. Anyways, so what I'm proposing to you today is that a 60-month, a 5-year out-of-pocket, pay for it out of capital reserve cost of $14,133.50. That's an all-in cost, and that's what it would cost us for 5 years worth of life of this machine. And this machine could last longer than that, so that would be nice. If we were to lease it, it would cost us $19,324.50. So we save over $5,000 just by purchasing this thing out of capital reserve. These are the types of decisions that we need to be making here. While it's more upfront cash, over the long haul, it saves us money. And I'm planning to bring more of these types of things to you because while we've definitely taken the strategy here of paying for capital improvements, things to the building and things like that, we have an opportunity to do these types of things that will save us money over the long haul too. So this is a small example, but I'll bring other ones to you over my career here that hopefully will save us money on these things in the future.
Josh, why wouldn't we take that from just the general operating budget?
Well, we could take it from the general operating budget, but it would require an increase in the budget to do that.
I'm just thinking that's something we probably should have budgeted for.
I definitely agree with you.
I mean, if we're trying to build up capital reserves, it sometimes gets too easy to take money from capital reserves.
I agree with you.
And if we're going to have some savings, like you pointed out through some of the retirements, wouldn't it still be prudent taking it from the general operating?
We could, I mean, the general operating budget could definitely afford it. My hesitation there, we don't realize all of those retirements. And don't forget too, that those retirements are used to offset the increases, other contractual increases.
I guess my comment is that I think we're getting comfortable going to capital reserves and maybe shouldn't be so comfortable.
Sure. And don't forget that one of the strategies that we've employed here is to purposely not budget for certain things in the general operating budget and move that cash to the capital reserve in an effort to keep the cost down to the general operating budget. So we can start definitely planning for these purchases in the general operating budget. But either way, let's just make an assumption here that we have a balanced budget at year end where we have no, our net position is just zero. We would not be making a transfer to the capital reserve that year. If the net position was positive, maybe we would make a transfer to the capital reserve that year, but it would be offset by the payment to the copier anyways. So yeah.
If it were leased, would it be coming from the general operating?
Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be. Yeah, and I'm fine with that.
Did we budget for the lease?
Yes.
So there's dollars in the general budget for the lease.
There are dollars in the budget this year. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
There isn't enough to pay for the whole machine up front, but yes, you're correct.
One question I have with it and saying, I guess we have some older machines, maybe that's why we're sort of talking about this.
This lease is up on this
here.
machine. Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering if you've recognized or seen any of this with the amount of Google Classroom, cyber, electronic transfer of information, everything. You know, the days of the Dunder Mifflin type office paper sales, I think is going to plummet. So I don't know if you've seen the volumes decrease during this time period, because I can tell you, from where I work, nobody uses a copier. So I'm not saying that it's not needed, but I guess maybe is there opportunities now that we can maybe say, hey, we don't need such a robust printer, not saying this is, but just replace
Yes.
and maybe strategically look at it, that we start to move towards an electronic type
Yeah.
documentation, things like
Sure.
that, if there are opportunities.
Yeah,
And I know it's sort of out there. I don't know.
Yeah, no, ironically, we were just talking about this today in an admin meeting, where Mr. Dalton would really appreciate it if we can get some of the paper that's sitting stale in his warehouse out of there, because they're not taking it as fast as they have been. So yes, we are seeing a decrease in cost, decrease in printing usage, printer usage. Speaking specifically about this one, this serves the district office. It's a smaller machine, and its usage is pretty steady for the most part. I think where the real opportunity is it's really twofold. If we continue this online hybrid type learning where you're in a classroom, but you're still learning a Google Classroom, you're getting your resources from Google Classroom. I think that the two larger machines that we have that we just started a lease on, I think last year, in 4 years, that may be a conversation where we can really talk, because that's where all the printing's done, is in those big machines. And we have some various machines out there that are smaller individual machines that maybe serve 3 or 4 people in a pod. That contract's up this year as well. So we have some opportunity in those.
Yeah, because I know just, based on how everybody's operating now, back in March, it was wow, how does this happen?
Yeah.
Now, guess what? Sometimes it's business as usual. And I hardly even take any, burn any ink up anywhere.
Sure. Sure.
It's all electronic transfer of information.
For sure.
Take a picture, fire it, do this, do that, so that's sort of a different way of thinking. So there could be some opportunities for that.
Yep. I spoke to a teacher today, and his comment, I had mentioned about printing. His comment to me was, he hasn't printed a single piece of paper yet this year. So
Yeah.
I know it's happening, and that's an improvement that's an improvement in the way we deliver the materials to the student. But it also requires a mindset change too. For most people, there's still a hesitation to go the whole way with that. And so maybe it takes a couple years for them to get used to it.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I think too, if you do interact with any of the other school districts and they come up with a best practice, they say, boy, that's pretty neat. That might be an opportunity there too.
Yep, for sure. So just a quick consensus on the printer. Do we want to, and actually, Mr. Packer, that's actually a good point. One thing that we could do is, when we have taken things out of capital reserve, we paid capital reserve back through fund transfers. So what I could do is I could use the money that we would save on the lease in the general fund, and instead of directing that towards a lease from another company, we can direct that back to the capital reserve as a payment back to the capital reserve. So we pay for the machine out of capital reserve, we pay the capital reserve back over 5 years. Are we okay with that? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that item? Before we move on to the other one, I apologize that I skipped over the correspondence in number 11. And so I just wanted to call your attention that, and I've sent this to you a number of times, and that's 11A is the handout. Just so you know, I do keep track of where we are. I just want to point out and to confirm with you, I do list, and I've listed there under our chart for the district that we have had 3 positive cases clear back. The first one in July, you can see listed there. We also had another case September 16th, and then immediately after that, we had one the 17th. And I just want to make sure that that we are keeping track of it. I have to again compliment everyone that's working here, all the students and the parents, because every day everyone's doing what we're exactly asking them to do. We have started to notice though that we have, if there's any elementary parents listening, there hasn't been a day that a high school student hasn't come with a face covering on, but we have started to experience some elementary students, probably about 6 to 8 each day. So just want to remind parents to help the younger ones, to remind them as they're coming to school to make sure that that they are wearing a face covering. But all in large, again, I have to compliment everyone for upholding to the expectations that we put in front of them. So I just wanted to point that out, and I apologize I skipped that before.
Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
What's the procedure when those students arrive without the face mask?
Sure. So what we have done, it's actually Dr. Schallenberger that we have tagged her with a responsibility. As soon as they are checked on the bus, there's usually someone that's checking on the bus with the temperature. We have another person step right out the step of the bus, and we guide that person, Dr. Schallenberger, standing right outside too, greeting. And we just real politely and nonchalantly and tell people to have a good day, but to move over and see Dr. Schallenberger, and she takes care of them. And before they go into the building, they have one on. And at the high school, honestly, we haven't even had an issue. So. Okay, other questions? Okay, then moving on to letter K under new business, approve educational service agreement with Adelphi. Actually, this just came a few days ago. And again, it's who we work with sometimes to place students in Indiana, across from Indiana Junior High. If you go to the very last page of that handout, you will see the 3 programs that they offer. Behavioral support, you can see the cost per day, whether it's regular ed or special education student, the same way with day treatment. And yes, I will tell you, we only have 1 student there this school year, and that is in the YES program. We do not have students in the other 2. So it's just an agreement that we'll have for the year, should we deem. And just so you know, just as we have up there in letter C and D in new business, you always have to be the one to approve them if we place someone there anyway. So that person actually has been in there before and started out the school year there also. Any questions? Yep. One student right now.
Normally, if I recall correctly, we budget normally 6 or 8 posts.
Yes, Josh can probably tell you more off the top of his head than me. This is probably the lowest outside placements that we've had in a while. We've had a lot last year.
We had a lot.
And
It hurt the budget.
And we transitioned people back. So we have very few out this year.
Okay, so I guess based on those, budgetary projections, those are things that we can probably get a pretty good handle on as the year progresses that say, we had, if you want to call it savings for the budget.
Sure.
Yeah, there's really 2 areas where, as the year goes on, you get a clearer picture of your if your budget projections are correct. 1 is outside placements, and 2 is cyber tuition. What we know is that I budgeted for approximately 30 outside cyber students. I think we have 34.
33, I believe.
33. So that's going to be up a little higher. But we have significantly fewer outside placements. Will that offset? I'm not 100% sure. I can tell you that outside placements are actually more expensive than cyber tuition.
And that's why I was just wanted to bring that up, because I know previous discussions we had on this. I mean, it can really, it can hit you.
And it's extremely difficult to budget. I mean, one year could be 400,000 and 1 year could be 100,000. It's really extremely difficult to budget.
Right.
But we look at averages and trends and try to go that direction.
Okay.
And I will talk to you in executive session more about C&D when things will hit you all of a sudden, but I'll give you the details of that in executive session.
Okay, thanks.
You don't know of any savings yet? Any guesstimate of what kind of savings we might be seeing?
You mean savings in the current year budget?
Yeah.
Well, yes. We have transferred a significant amount of general fund expenditures into the grants that we've received. So that's been very helpful. But in terms of things that we've budgeted for this year that we plan to underspend or not spend, there hasn't been any of those things yet. But I will tell you, spending is lagging. I think for the most part, both buildings have understand that we're in a spending crunch. And so I think that spending is lagging for that purpose. And I thank them for that, because if we can slow spending to find out if we're actually going to receive all the revenue, that would be nice. But at this point, I can't point to one thing where we're underspending or under budget. Well, we're under budget everywhere at the moment, but hopefully it's like that for a while.
Other questions? Okay, next, Operation Recognition High School Diploma. If you want to take a look at that handout, we actually just got this request a day or two ago. And I will tell you, in our graduation policy. We do have this, you do have this opportunity as a board to grant or deny. So it's the operation recognition, and what it's doing is recognizing individuals that left school to be in the military. You can see who this is, a grandchild actually requesting for a veteran. Of course, the veteran has passed away, but you can see that this particular individual is asking for the diploma to be issued. And you can see also the questions that have been asked on the application. And you can also see one of the criteria is, have they been honorably discharged and there was no issue? That evidence has been proven as it's on the second page. So it would be your decision as a board if you want us to move forward. And you may say, well, what does that mean? Well, we would simply order a high school diploma if you want to grant that in a motion next Thursday. And we would sign off on that diploma and issue it to the grandchild. And you can see that request is being asked by Mr. Steve Miller. Any questions, comments?
Mr. Johnson, may I read the?
Oh, yeah, if you would like to read the request. Yeah, go ahead.
So when the request came in, it came in with the following email. My name is Steve Miller, and my grandfather, Robert Kropanak, was born in Clymer in 1925 and attended Clymer schools. During his junior year at the age of 17, he dropped out of school for the war effort and joined the Navy in February of 1943. While in the Navy, he was part of a top secret government project to develop radio-guided weapons, a precursor to our modern guided missiles. His contribution to this project was paramount. After the war, he returned to Clymer, eventually moving to Erie and working at General Electric manufacturing aircraft generators, where he married his childhood sweetheart, Vivian Hinderleiter, Clymer High School class of 1943, and had one daughter, my mother. He understood the importance of education and instilled in us the desire to better ourselves through higher learning. Before he passed in 2007, he said he did not regret serving his country, but always hoped he had graduated from Clymer High School and received his diploma. I contacted the Pennsylvania Department of Military and Veteran Affairs, and they informed me of a 2018 program called Operation Recognition, whereby veterans who did not complete their education due to service during wartime can apply to the school district for the issuance of a high school diploma. Excuse me. I would greatly appreciate it if you could assist me with this process of applying for this high school diploma. And then he goes on to say this would mean so much to our family and to his memory if he can finally receive the diploma he gave up to serve our country during World War II.
Okay, any questions? Everyone okay with putting that on the agenda next week to approve? Okay. Okay, so I do want to point out that if you, that we did have on an original agenda that we were going to approve an MOU with PMEA. I will tell you that what was in that MOU, we have sat down as administrators and also with the Teachers Association. We will still be moving ahead with what was in there. Only we've decided that there was no need for an MOU. So that is why that has actually been removed. Next, on the agenda that we've added for this evening, first is an Intercom proposal, and that is actually being paid through Pccd Grant. Again, Pccd was started grants for safety in the past, and a considerable amount of money was added this year. And we're moving along quickly because we're told that that has to be spent by the end of the month. So we're going to ask Mr. Gramling if he will show you a proposal for intercom system within the district. I will tell you that the intercoms, we've done a lot of things safety-wise, cameras, et cetera. We've built what I think is a tremendous amount of safety. I will tell you, though, that intercom system was here before I came in 2004. We've been carrying it along, so to speak, but he will describe to you what this new intercom system and all the bells and whistles that it will provide for us. Mr. Gramling?
As Mr. Johnson mentioned, our current intercom system in both buildings is very old. Several years ago, and I'm not exactly sure when, a digital piece was added on top to make it a little easier to manage. What that has done, though, has created a divide, two systems that need to talk to each other. So we have the digital piece, which is newer, talking to the analog piece that then goes out to the speakers. The proposal that's in front of you is to replace that back end piece that is all still analog to digital gateways that would talk directly to the digital system. This is not replacing the speakers in every room or any of the wiring. So the point there is that a speaker is a speaker, whether it's analog or not, but it's really that piece that's in the back located in the two buildings that is really our pain point. When we are having those pieces serviced from time to time, we are actually having parts that have been cannibalized from other schools installed into the system. That's how old it is, that they don't make the parts anymore, but they have a lot of parts on hand because a lot of schools have updated their equipment. As Mr. Johnson said, when it comes to security and all the things we've done, this is the one area that keeps me up at night because there's no guarantee when we pick up that phone to make an announcement over the intercom that those two pieces are going to talk to one another and that message is going to get sent out. We've had fire drills where Mr. Johnson goes to go over the intercom and he's talking in the high school but not in the elementary, and we need to get things reset. So, we're on the ALICE system for security. Two of those pieces are alert and inform. Well, if we don't have a working intercom, we can't alert, and then we can't inform people. So there's really that piece that we're concerned about. So we've talked about budgeting money to replace this unit over time, and that's when this Pccd grant opportunity came, and enough money in there to fund the project. The Pccd grant this year has been more geared towards COVID and responding to COVID. So to justify that and to use that opportunity, what we've designed this system, and I've talked to the company to create this, is the ability to ring bells in certain areas, to make announcements in certain areas of the building. So what this functionality would give us is, so right now in the high school, the bell rings, everybody comes out into the hall. We would be able to zone it so that we could release certain sections of the building at a time. That would be a way of keeping the large crowds out of the halls. So that is how we would use the system to help us in a pandemic. We could also play pre-recorded messages, and that would give us those functionality if we needed to. The original price that the company came in, and this is a reseller of the current system. Rollin is our current system, and this is using that same equipment. So we're able to leverage that digital piece that was installed years ago, and the speakers that, of course, are already installed, and just replace that center unit by using Rollin. All those pieces will come together without any additional equipment. The original price that they came in with was $56,190. After negotiation, we got them to come down to $53,366, so a savings of a little over $2,800. And like we said, this will be paid out of Pccd grant money.
Any questions for Mr. Gramling? And I will say, and you may say, well, why did you allow the intercom system to get to, well, I will tell you that's been in many budgets. And before it even gets to you with budget, I say, well, can we patch that up? And we have. So now that we have the opportunity through grant fund, I think is the best opportunity for us to take care of it. It has always bothered me in recent year or two, the things that David pointed out. So it does come down to safety. Yes, it's a big cost that's listed there. That's why we have kept it and always shelved it, so to speak. But now that the opportunity, I don't know if we'll come across another opportunity to make sure that it gets done. So do you have questions?
I have one question. As far as the system itself and looking at the scope of work, we talked about speakers, that the same speakers will be here, and also the wiring. And I guess, is that a concern? Because I know a lot of times when you have mix match systems and then you think you solve the problem, and then it can become the simplest issue when you try to troubleshoot, saying, that darn wire was what was causing the problem. So I would hate for us to invest $50,000 in the system, but you can't get there from here because of the wiring. I mean, do we have any areas that we would suspect issue with wiring that maybe we need to take and address to make this an effective system?
You would have to answer that one for me, Dave, because you're in the wires every day more than me.
Not really. So what our issue is more with the amps that connect to those speakers, they will go out. So like intermediate wing here in the elementary reported that they weren't getting any of the announcements. That's an amp issue, not a wiring or speaker issue. And when we discussed this project with Open Systems originally, I said, should we talk about replacing the speakers? Should we talk about? And they said that they wouldn't suggest that because for the most part, this is what they would be installing in a school anyhow. There is digital speakers, there's boxes they can put in rooms that add a lot of functions that we don't have and maybe don't have a need for. So he said that would really be why he would install a digital speaker over an analog, is if you wanted a call button in the room, whether you wanted a panic button in the room. Those are stuffs that would call for having digital speakers. But he said if you don't have the need for that, or you don't currently have it, then this is exactly what they would install.
Yeah, and I wouldn't think the speakers so much. I'd be more concerned if the wiring itself would cause issue.
I don't think in the time I've been here, I don't think we've had any issues with the message, if the system's working right, with the messages getting over the speakers. The speakers and the wiring, and even the speakers that we've added over the last couple of years, the issue isn't getting the message over the speaker wire and to the speaker. The issue is the back end fails at times. And what's happening is, and it seemingly fails right at the times when we're trying to do some sort of crisis test around here, where Mr. Johnson will go through a 3 or 5 minute spiel over the intercom, and we'll find out that it's only being broadcast over the high school, but it's not being broadcast over the elementary school. That's all a back end issue, and that's what we're replacing here. The speakers, when you're talking about analog speakers, speaker is a speaker, right? So we're good there. If we were to find out that there were some wiring issues, this new system will definitely bring that to light. But we don't anticipate that being an issue.
Okay, well, I guess if it would, I mean, obviously we would have to address it to make this an efficient system. So I guess maybe one step at a time, but just don't overlook the fact that it could be right in front of you.
For sure.
And I want to point out that a lot of additions have been added speaker wise. So now the intercom can be heard in places such as the greenhouses, such that it can be heard clear down at the fields and the practice fields now. That didn't happen before. So we've also added the speakers to the exterior. So if you're here, even if you were here at graduation, you can hear the sound. There is no doubt that you can hear any intercom type situation. So I do have to say that, and you could probably add more to it, Dave, that we've definitely added the outside speakers because that was one thing that we did address a couple years ago when we went through Alice trainings, was that, okay, it's great and dandy in the inside, but as you go and leave or you're on the outside, you don't necessarily hear all that. So we have added an extensive amount of speakers to the outside. I don't know if you want to add any of the details to that, Dave, as to what it was that was added, but
Yeah, we have added like the speakers at the field and speakers on the exterior of the building. That has been done as a digital edition. That functionality is in the system and would be able to tie into those a little better. So right now we're having an analog to digital conversions being done there. I would expect that piece could go away. But we've tried to extend the reach of our intercom through various means, wireless bridges and whatnot. So that's was a big part of our security last year, was getting that the announcements made down on the football field. Because the concern there was a lot of gym classes are now using the field almost on a daily basis, and some classes are going out to the, so we would hate to have a security incident here in the building, and here comes the gym class back into the building. So that's why we stretched the speakers to the outside of the building, and especially this year as more classes are using the outside. Like I know Mrs. Ray's science class is outside pretty routinely. So getting that intercom to the outside was a big piece of the security.
other questions for that item?
The budget or the grant takes care of the full amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Other questions? Okay. And last item, and again, I would want to talk to you for a few minutes in executive session, but last item that we have added this evening is First Commonwealth Insurance Proposal, and I will turn that over to Josh.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson. So what was it, last week or the week before? The Budget and Finance Committee had a meeting with First Commonwealth Insurance Agency, and in which they presented a proposal to us. So there's a lot of information on this proposal, specifically in the statement of work, but let me just tell you why I engaged this company and what our hope is through this proposal. We do a lot of talking around here about costs of salaries. We look at contracts. We talk about negotiations. We analyze with other school districts. We analyze internally. We compare groups and classifications to each other. But we never really talk about the cost of our health benefits and the cost of and it's a significant cost. It's $155,000 a month to this district alone for health insurance this year. That's a very significant cost. And we almost pay it blindly without really having a conversation about it. And so I feel obligated to tell you that because it's such a significant expense, maybe we should find out if it's justified. And so one of the things that I had hoped to do, and I really only know of one company that does this, and it's only because they've done it with other school districts in the past, and they've even specifically done it as a consultant to our consortium in the past. So what they're proposing is a number of things, but the end result, if you flip to the back, is a guarantee. So the cost of the project is the cost for them to do this is $7,500, in which they are guaranteeing that if they can't find at least $75,000 in savings, we don't pay them a dime. And they will analyze in depth our plan design. They will analyze in depth a number of things. Let me just go to the front here. They will analyze our medical and drug plan. They will look at our consortium terms, our data, and look at contract reviews. They'll look at our prescription rebate and contract provisions. Because here's one thing that we know. Health insurance is complex in all ways and at all levels of health insurance. And so sometimes what we find is that health insurance isn't completely revealed to us in complete and plain terms. Because it's such a complex system. You've got medical, you got drug, you got rebates, you got provisions, you've got middlemen, you've got pharmacy benefit managers, you've got consultant A, and you've got consultant B, and you've got back end over here and front end over here. So you have a lot of things going on in health insurance that aren't right there in front of your face. And so because it's such a high cost, $155,000, maybe it's justified. I don't know. Maybe everything that we're paying for is 100% justified, and that could be likely. But since it's a high cost, it's something that we should probably think about reviewing every once in a while, every 5 years, every 6 years, every 3 years. I don't know, something. But I can tell you, we haven't gone through an exercise like this, and we need to look at this thing because it is it's a beast. It's a massive beast. So and I'm not sure of any other companies that do this, which is why there's only one proposal in front of you. And they have done this before for members of this same consortium in the past.
I'm just confused. Don't we have a flat rate that we pay for our health insurance?
We do not.
We
So
pay out of pocket with these
we are
things.
entirely self-insured. So if our members have $1 million in claims, we pay $1 million
Right.
in
Now, the
premium.
$75,000 savings that they're finding us, it's dollars that we already spent. So we're not going to see a savings.
Well,
Like the mucus protection they were talking about, which is a Kleenex.
yes, to some extent, but
So it's
What-
water that's already over the dam.
to some extent, but what they would be suggesting is ways for us to prevent spending that money again.
Why isn't our consortium doing this? Why aren't they paying them and checking the costs for us?
Well, why would they?
Well, we're part of it. We're paying them, right?
Right.
To manage it. Wouldn't they want to get the best deal for us?
Why?
So they can reduce our costs and maybe we'll stay with them.
Why are they motivated to reduce our costs? They're not motivated to reduce our costs.
Okay.
Well, that's what we're motivated to reduce our costs,
Right.
right? And we can do it a couple different ways. We can do it on our own. We can attempt to make our employees healthier, right? So they don't use the insurance as much. But you also want to encourage usage in things like preventative benefits, annual wellness checks, those types of
Yeah,
things.
that's all stuff with that. But
So we
I'm-
could do that
I'm-
here.
I'm asking, yeah, but the $7,500, I don't see how we're going to get that back. That's what I'm saying.
So again, some of the things that they could potentially suggest to us, we would have to make a decision to implement
Right.
to be able to save that money going forward. The drastic shift here, the all-out drastic shift here could be a potential recommendation to leave the consortium, move to another health insurance provider, and reap the potential savings associated with doing something like
Which
that.
potentially would be them, correct?
Well, they're not,
They're a broker.
they're a broker, so we
Right.
wouldn't be moving. I mean,
We could be switching to use them as our broker.
we could be switching to use them as our
Yeah.
broker, yes. And if they were to find us $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 worth of savings, yes, so yeah, that could happen.
Yeah, so
Yes.
that's why I'm saying the consortium should probably be sharpening their pencil or else we might leave. They should be doing this for us anyway.
I'm
And the
not-
$7,500, is it in our budget? Where are we getting that money?
Well, again, they have to identify
But
$75,000.
it's water already the dam. It's water already over the dam.
But yes,
So we're
the
not
ones that
getting
they would identify for us that have already occurred, but it is possible that we could prevent those expenditures from reoccurring
Right.
going forward.
But not before the end of the budget year, probably.
Well, our rates are locked in for this
Yeah,
year.
see, that's what I'm saying.
It could be for next
That's
year.
what I'm saying. So in other words, you're taking the $7,500, which isn't budgeted for, and spending it.
Yes.
In hopes that they're going to show us that we overspent $75,000 somewhere.
Yes.
Because they know what to look for.
Yes. Well, we
In
would,
hopes that maybe next year we'll come to them and want them for our insurance company. That's their angle. so-
that is entirely possible.
I'm thinking this is just a waste of money, to be honest with you.
One item that I just read that guarantee that they have down below here, and you'd mentioned about to try to reduce our cost of what we pay out in healthcare claims. Say, for instance, this group would come in and say, okay, if you implement a Get Healthy plan for your employees, which means they have to go and maybe, focus on weight loss, focus on eating healthy and this and that. And the potential savings can be $125,000. Okay. A number yanked out of the air that says, hey, based on this, that, and whatever, you could save that. I mean, is that the sort of feedback that they would be intending to give us to say, implement this program? It has the potential to save you this, because if the water's already over the dam,
Sure.
you can't do nothing with it. But if they just say, if you do this, like if you eat a healthy diet and you exercise 30 minutes a day and you do this, and you'll have the potential to have this savings. Okay, here's give me my 7,500. I would hope that wouldn't get to that point.
That's not the impression. And Mr. Belchick, was at the meeting as well. That's not the impression I got. And that's not, when I look at the statement of work, I don't see that as something that they could recommend under this statement of work. It doesn't talk about implementing, which we should be talking about probably here anyways, but it doesn't talk about implementing ways for our employees to become healthier, and which would thereby reduce our future costs. That they never mentioned anything like that to us.
Okay. And the only reason I mention it, I mean, I'd proceed with caution, just would be my suggestion, because I always go back to saying liars figure and figures lie. You can throw anything on paper,
Sure.
and you can spin it whatever way you want to make it sound great. But I just hope that investing $7,500 does give us some valuable information to maybe take with us, not just throw out an implementation plan or whatever the case might be.
Can I make a suggestion? I think we use this as one viable option. And I think there's other things we probably need to do. I just heard that, and I think this is accurate, that I don't know what our drug costs are, but drug costs are going sky high. And I just heard that, I know Highmark's doing, and I think everybody's probably doing, they're starting to tier drugs. So before, drugs were lumped together, but now drugs are going to start being tiered 1, 2, 3, 4. And the more costly drugs, they're not paying for the more costly drugs. So I think we're in for a little bit of a surprise in our increase in our health insurance costs going forward. I think it's going to be a lot worse than $155,000 a month. So I agree that we do need to look at ways of reducing that. I think we've been locked in with one provider. I would be concerned that they're not looking out for our best interest. That could be true.
Yeah, we don't know.
And I do think we should look at other options, more than just what you have there.
Sure.
I mean, Ron, your suggestion is why pay $7,500? Maybe let's look at some other things and keep that on the table. I think now's the time to do it. And again, I think that if we don't do it, I think we're more likely to see significant increases. I was just in a meeting yesterday in Huntington, and the same thing is happening with this company. Got their new quotes from Highmark, and they are outrageous. And I think we're going to continue to see that too. So I think that is a big ticket item for this school district. I would suggest you continue to work with the Budget and Finance Committee, include whoever, like Ron was at the last meeting, or whoever wants to come. Let's sit down and look at some more options. Okay. I think it's still viable to look at it. Okay. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't have
I'm
any
fine
issue
with
with, proceeding, but I just wanted to caution that, sometimes these things can lead that way. And maybe if you have others.
I don't think
Like
it's so
Bob had
much,
said,
I don't think it's so much everybody has the wellness programs anymore. I think it's the real cost of just healthcare right now, and primarily drug cost. Do we know how much, do we know what percent of our drug cost of our 155,000?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I have the data.
I guess it's high.
I'm sure it is, because we do cover, we talk about these things on a regular basis. There are some really, really, really expensive drugs out there. Really expensive drugs. I was shocked to see how expensive some of
And
these
that's
drugs
why
are.
they're starting to tier them.
And so when you talk about those types of things, we'll put aside the fact that there are possibly other revenue streams built into these things that we don't know about. So we might be paying for things that we don't know about. Let's put that aside for a moment. Things that we don't know is how are we compared to others in similar situations? How is our consortium doing compared to other consortiums? How does Penn's Manor compare to another school district on the eastern side of the state and a consortium over there? How do we compare? So one of the things that they talk about in here is comparing us to our peers, right? We don't really do that inside the consortium. We compare ourselves to each other inside the consortium, but we don't compare ourselves to other consortiums. So that's one thing that they talk about in here. The other things that they talk about in here, for example, stop loss insurance. So stop loss insurance is insurance you take out to aid in large claims. So I don't know off the top of my head what our threshold is for stop loss insurance, but stop loss insurance is very expensive to a consortium
Josh,
of this size.
is everybody in the consortium, do they have the same design? In other words,
No.
who determined all the stop losses for every school? Does every school have the same stop loss?
Yes.
So somebody else came in and designed the stop loss,
Yes, because the stop loss
not
insurance,
for us, but for the consortium.
right, because it's looked at, the claims are looked at as a whole, across the entire consortium. So the stop loss insurance could be potentially catered and customized to be just for Penn's Manor if, once again, drastic, we come out of the consortium and we go somewhere else. So there's a lot of things looked at. The other thing that's looked at is more internal Highmark data that isn't necessarily presented to us. Looking at claims in detail, for example. One of the examples given to us was that, and I don't know the specific examples, but the overcharging or the mischarging of certain items. And I think the example that they used when they presented to us was that, I forget the name of that.
It was a mucus containment
A
system.
mucus containment system, which was a box of
hundreds
Kleenex.
dollars, and it was a box of Kleenex.
Box of Kleenex. So
And when they brought it up, they said, the hospital says, "Oh, yeah, okay." I mean, that sounds like fraud to me,
it does,
you know?
and
I
it could be
Somebody needs to go to jail.
right. And the other example of that is where, and I think the example they used in the presentation was that they put the comma or the decimal they put the decimal in the wrong place when they charged the bill to Highmark. They put the decimal in the wrong place, and they discovered this error on the back end. And for discovering that error for Highmark, Highmark charges an administrative fee to correct the problem. And so one of the things that First Commonwealth Insurance Agency talked about was they pay more attention to the claims so that this doesn't happen to us. So we don't know if it's happening to us or not. We don't know. We don't see that data. And most people, when they go to the doctors, especially once you've reached your deductible and you're not paying attention anymore, if something was charged at $100,000 and it was only supposed to be charged at $1,000, who's really paying attention to that?
Just like little details with First Commonwealth Insurance, they look into it. They're going to do the best effort for us and try to do the savings. As I look at some of this, and I don't know, did you do this or?
No, this is there from their proposal.
Okay. So they provided this
Yes.
document to
Yes.
us. Do they know how to spell Aaron?
I saw that.
Okay, that's those little items like that. Whenever I have somebody come to me and say, I'll look at it in such great detail, before I'd release a document, I'd double check to make sure that I'd spell everything correctly.
I agree.
Once it's a typo, twice you don't know what you're doing.
I agree.
Little things like that are just a pet peeve. So I guess it's just some of those things when somebody can say, you know what, I'm going to dig down in the weeds and give you what you really need because that's in your best interest.
Josh, just for sake of time, let's take it back to
Sure.
the budget and finance and spend some time on that.
Okay, so just before we end, I do want to just say to and if we could have executive session afterwards, but I just want you to know as board members, once again, and to families and students that are out there, for the things that we've gone through, the changes that keep happening daily. As we get cases here, I will tell you, we have had 100% cooperation. And so hats off to everybody that makes up this entire district, for whether it be a student, whether it be a parent, whether it be an employee. I just want to thank everyone again, because I know it's all of it is a change for us. So is there any other items before we adjourn this evening we'd like to talk about in the open session? Okay. If not, we will have the business meeting next Thursday at 7 a.m. Thank you very much.